In the middle of a red dirt square, Ciala, a blind from birth Apache girl, stood tied with her hands pulled high up onto a sun-scorched wooden gallows. The rope tightened around her neck, scraping against skin already slick with blood. Her tangled black hair covered the eyes that had never seen light, but her posture, though trembling, refused to bow. The crowd around her roared with cruel laughter, hurling words as sharp as stones. Why would a blind freak even need to live? Let's see if death has a soft spot. A slave handler gripped the axe handle tightly, waiting for the signal to kick the wooden platform beneath her. Just one kick, and her life would end in silence. And then the thunder of hooves shattered the air. Silas Carrion, a 42-year-old widower and rancher who lived on the outskirts of town, appeared. His eyes were cold as steel as he took in the scene before him. "Stop." The crowd turned. The slave handler sneered. "Looking to buy this blind corpse, cowboy?" Silas pulled 10 worn silver coins from his pocket and tossed them onto the ground in front of him. "Let her live." The cold clink of metal hitting the earth instantly shifted their expressions. Money was the only thing they truly feared. The handler shrugged, bent down to scoop up the coins, and cut the rope. Ciala dropped and Silas caught her just in time. Her neck was bruised, her breathing ragged, but her lips still fought to whisper a faint sound. Am I alive?" Silas tightened his hold, his voice low and steady, like a vow carved in stone. "As long as I am standing, you will not die." In the wind swirling with sand and grit, a life once considered worth less than an animal's had been saved by a man who, for years, had sealed his heart shut. But Silas did not know the moment he reached out and caught that blind Apache girl. Fate had also laid its hand on his shoulder. Silas helped Ciala onto the horse. She bit her lip to endure the pain, her hands still trembling from the rope's long grip. Though she could not see, she could feel the venomous stares still trailing behind her. Silas snapped the reins and rode away from Bitter Dust Gulch before those cruel men had a chance to change their minds. The road back to the ranch was filled with sand and sharp rocks. Each jolt of the saddle made Ciala wince softly, but she never cried out. Silas glanced over and saw the bruises around her neck, her face pale from exhaustion. He spoke gently. "You can lean on me." At first, she resisted. Survival had trained her to be strong, but the long journey and her broken body eventually won out. Ciala rested her head on his shoulder, letting out a breath weary, but full of trust. When they reached the cabin, Silas lifted her down. The small house stood quiet in the middle of a vast prairie, where he had lived alone for many years ever since his wife passed. No laughter, no voices. Only the wind whistling through a crumbling fence. He laid her on the bed. She reached out, feeling the coarse wool blanket. Then the edge of the frame. Her ability to memorize the space was astonishingly fast. Silas lit a candle, fetched a bowl of water and a clean cloth. He sat beside her and gently touched her wrist. "I need to clean this wound. It will sting a little." "I can take it," she said, her voice hoarse but steady. As Silas wiped the bruises on her neck, Ciala shivered, not from pain, but because it had been so long since anyone had touched her with kindness. He asked, "What is your name?" "Ciala." "That's a beautiful name." "A blind girl's name means nothing," she replied, her voice turning cold. Silas paused and looked deeply into her face. "Every name means something, especially when it's the one thing no one can steal from you." Ciala went quiet. She turned toward his voice, as if listening with her whole being. "Why did you pay for me?" Silas did not answer right away. For a moment, his eyes drifted far, to a distant afternoon, to the look in his wife's eyes before she left this world. Then he said, "I could not save the one I loved, but today, I could save you." Those words sliced through the wall she had built around her heart. Ciala turned away, her blind eyes filled with both doubt and hope, a feeling she had buried long ago. Silas poured warm water and placed the bowl into her hands. "You are safe here." She lifted the bowl to her lips, her hands still trembling. The flickering candle cast the shadows of two people who had once been broken by life, now slowly beginning to lean on each other to rise again. Outside, the wind howled harder. But inside the old cabin, a new life had just taken its first breath. Early the next morning, Silas opened his eyes to a strange quiet in the cabin. He stepped into the main room and froze. Ciala was no longer in bed. Instead, she was kneeling on the dirt floor, her hands tracing every plank, every edge of the door, every object placed along the wall. She moved slowly, but with precision, as if she were drawing a map with her fingertips. Silas asked, "What are you doing?" Without turning her head, she replied, "If I want to live, I need to know where I am." Her tone was not arrogant. It was the resolve of someone who refused to be underestimated ever again. Silas watched as Ciala moved into the kitchen area. She touched the sack of cornmeal, smelled the lingering smoke in the air, tapped gently on a pot to determine what it was made of. Her hand slid over the handle of a knife and immediately paused at the blade to measure its danger. Though blind, she sensed more than many who could see. Silas stepped forward to help, but Ciala quietly shifted away. "Let me do it myself." He did not argue. This woman had survived hell. She deserved the right to decide each step she took. By late morning, Silas was out in the yard splitting wood. A shadow appeared beside him. Ciala had followed the sound of the axe hitting the logs. Silas shook his head. "You need rest. Being nearly hanged did not kill me. A little work will not, either." She knelt and felt the logs. Her hands followed the cracks in the grain, instantly telling which pieces were rotten and which were solid. She stacked them, marking each one in her mind with touch and memory. Silas watched, a quiet respect rising in his chest. "Ciala," he said slowly, choosing each word with care. "You are stronger than anyone I have ever met." She turned her face toward his voice, her blind eyes glowing with fire. "I have to be strong, because if I fall, no one's coming to catch me." Silas gripped the axe handle tighter. Not a single word of pity left his lips, because he understood. Pity was the second chain she would never allow. That afternoon, as the wind swept across the prairie, Ciala made her way toward the chicken coop. She listened to the flap of wings, counting each step to memorize the distance from the cabin to the fence. A chicken slipped out, darting past her feet. In a blink, Ciala bent down and snatched it with lightning-fast hands. Silas stood several yards away, witnessing it all speechless. As night fell, Silas laid out a simple dinner, cornmeal cakes and smoked meat. He slid the plate toward her. "This house is no longer just mine." Ciala set her spoon down and gently touched the rough calluses on Silas's hand. "Home is where someone wants you to wake up in the morning." Silas swallowed hard, a lump rising in his throat. Maybe, for the first time in many years, he wanted to see tomorrow. That night, the sky was pitch black. Blending with the wind rustling over the cabin roof was the uneven heartbeat of a man who had forgotten how to love and of a woman who had never truly been loved. Silas sat at the table, patching the worn leather of a saddle. Ciala sat a few steps away, her head tilted slightly, as if she were listening to even the faintest sound he made. Suddenly she asked softly, "Do you see me, the way others do?" Silas set the needle down, surprised. "How do they see you?" Ciala gave a faint, bitter smile. "As a burden, something to be ashamed of." Silas stepped forward and placed a hand on the table. "I see in you what they never could." "What is that?" "Strength." She fell silent for a moment. Not because of the compliment, but because it was the first time anyone had said that to her. Silas rummaged through a chest and pulled out a simple dress. The stitches were clumsy, but careful and sincere. "I tried making this. You might not like it, but you made this for me. I wanted you to have something that did not remind you of the gallows." Ciala squinted, blind eyes trying to see with her heart. She reached out and touched the dress from the collar to the waistband, then paused at a raised seam. "You do not owe me anything, Silas." Exhaled quietly. "No, but I owe myself a chance to be kind." As he helped her try on the dress, his fingers accidentally brushed against her firm arm, and a small spark jolted straight to both their hearts. Silas pulled back like he had touched fire. Ciala tilted her head and whispered, "I am not afraid to touch you, Silas." She reached out for his hand and he let her find it. Those soft but steady fingertips traced the rough calluses in his palm, as if she were reading the book of his life through touch. Slowly, precisely, deeply, his breath-quickened senses he thought long dead began to stir within him. "I do not owe you," Ciala said, her voice nearly trembling, "which is why I want to stay." Silas looked into those blind eyes that could not see him, but somehow understood him more than anyone who ever had. He leaned in closer, their breaths brushing against each other, just a little closer. And their lips would touch, but Ciala pulled back gently. Not out of fear. She simply said, not out of pity. When your heart truly calls me, I will hear it. Silas was a man used to guns, to fights, to pain, but he had never prepared for tenderness that could undo him like this. Inside that small cabin, a strange warmth began to spread, not from the fire, but from two hearts finding their way to each other through the darkness. Thank you so much for being here. If this story brought back old memories of dusty afternoons and the echo of horse hooves pounding in your chest, consider subscribing to my channel, so that every day we can sit down together. And I will tell you another story from the West. That day, the air was unusually dry. The sky hung heavy and leaden gray, as if warning of something bad to come. Silas was repairing a fence post when the sound of horse hooves echoed from the direction of town. He immediately tightened his grip on the hammer, his eyes sharpening like steel. Ciala stepped onto the porch. Her head tilted slightly. Who is it? Not the good kind, Silas answered, his voice dropping low. 3 men on horseback appeared, faces masked, pistols at their sides, bandits who had once spread fear throughout Bitter Dust Gulch. They had heard whispers at the market that Silas had bought a blind Apache girl. The leader sneered. We heard you've got yourself quite the prize, cowboy. Silas stepped in front of the door. Get off my land. One of the others laughed. 10 silver coins for a blind body. Pity must have blinded you worse than her. Ciala stood in the shadows behind Silas, gripping a wooden stick ready to fight, even without sight. But Silas did not let her step forward. The leader spat on the ground. We're taking that savage girl back and the silver you wasted. Then, we'll kill you just to tidy things up. Then he drew his gun. Silas dove to the side and fired first. Bang! The leader took a bullet to the shoulder and fell off his horse. The other 2 fired back bullets slammed into the porch post, inches from Silas's head. Ciala heard the hiss of gunfire, her heart pounding like war drums. Silas turned his back and shouted, Ciala, get back. Lock the door. But just then, crack, a bullet ripped through Silas's shoulder, sending him sprawling face first onto the steps. Hot blood soaked through his shirt. He tried to rise, but the world spun around him. The 2 remaining bandits charged forward, guns raised to finish the job. Ciala held her breath. She listened to the boots creaking on wood, to the shallow breaths of the man who was about to take everything from her. When he came close enough, she swung the stick hard at his head. The man dropped like a sack of flour. The last one cursed, turning his gun toward Ciala. But Silas fired one final shot before collapsing from the pain. The man crumpled to the dirt, his pistol slipping from his hand. Silence fell across the yard, broken only by heavy breathing and the howling wind. Ciala dropped to her knees beside Silas. Silas, can you hear me? Silas struggled to open his eyes, a faint smile tugging at his lips. I told you. As long as I can still stand, you will not die. She clutched his hand, her voice trembling with tears. Silas, I haven't heard all your heart has to say yet. He lifted a hand, trying to reach her cheek, but his strength gave out, and his breath grew faint. Ciala turned toward the wind, her ears straining. The town was 10 miles away. There was no one left to save Silas, except her. She stood up, wiped her tears, and whispered, The darkness does not scare me. I've lived in it all my life. She bandaged Silas's wound as best she could, grabbed her walking stick, turned toward Bitter Dust Gulch, and began moving swiftly toward town, not because she owed him, but because her heart had already chosen him. Night fell fast. No moon, no stars, only a thick, suffocating blackness covering the desert. But to Ciala, darkness was no enemy. It was the world she had known since birth. She ran. Every step was a silent prayer. Let Silas still be breathing when I return. Please, let him still be breathing. Her bare feet bled from the sharp stones, but Ciala did not stop. She could not. When she reached the pine forest, she slowed. She listened. The wind through the branches told her south. The scent of damp soil led her toward the stream. The trail would rise gently for a few steps, then slope steeply down. All of it lived in her memory in touch and sound. Each breath tore at her throat like knives, but she refused to stop. because Silas had stood between her and death, and now she swore to stand between him and cruel fate. 10 more miles. Suddenly snap. A thorny branch whipped across her face, leaving a long cut. She flinched, wiped the blood away, and kept running. 6 miles. She paused, tilting her head once more. There, the faint smell of gunpowder. The town was close. 3 miles. Her knees gave out. Her heart felt ready to burst. But she remembered Silas's hand taking hers at the dinner table, the first touch that told her she was real. She stood up. Bitter dust gulch emerged not through her eyes, but through the smell of horse manure, the sound of a hammer striking an anvil, and the squeak of saloon doors. Ciala pounded on the door of the guard post, screaming with every breath she had left. Bandits! At the ranch north of the prairie. He's dying. Please, please save him. The guard bolted upright. What did you say? Ciala. The sheriff appeared, stunned to see the blind Apache girl who had just saved the town from losing a good man. Without a second's delay, the riders prepared. Before they galloped off, Ciala rasped, "Take me with you. I will guide the way." The sheriff nodded for the first time. No one doubted her. They rode through the night. Ciala sat in front of the saddle, gripping the reins with both hands. Every time the path shifted, she tilted her head and listened. The wind brushing against leaves, the change in insect sounds, the texture of the dirt beneath the hooves. Turn left. Downhill. Straight. I hear the stream. No one dared laugh at her now. Everyone rode in silence, for they were being led by someone who had never seen light. By the time they reached the cabin, the sun was just peeking over the horizon. The bandits were gone, but Silas lay near death, blood staining half the porch. Ciala dropped beside him, grabbing his hand. "Silas, I'm back. I'm back." His fingers responded weakly, but they responded. A soldier pressed down to stop the bleeding and laid Silas on a stretcher. As they prepared to leave, Ciala turned back to the cabin, standing tall. Tears streamed down her face. "I do not want you to die. You must hold on." And for the first time in her life, Ciala's darkness became the light that led an entire town forward. Silas lay in a small room at the Bitter Dust Gulch Clinic. Morning sunlight filtered through the dusty window, casting a pale glow across his face. White bandages wrapped around his shoulder and chest, already stained with a faded red. In the chair beside his bed, Ciala sat as still as a statue. Except her heart was screaming. She held Silas's hand tightly, the same hands that had once pulled her from the gallows. The doctor came to check on him, whispering, "He's strong. But it all depends on whether he chooses to keep fighting." Ciala leaned in, her voice trembling as she whispered near his ear, "You cannot leave me. Please don't make me afraid." Word spread quickly across the town. The blind Apache girl, once nearly hanged, now stood as the one who had saved the town from bandits. The same people who once spat at her now came to the clinic's door and bowed their heads. An elderly woman, hands shaking, left a basket of bread at the doorstep. "Thank you for saving someone from this town." A small child placed a tiny eagle feather in her hand. "You're very brave, ma'am." Ciala could not see them, but she heard it in every breath they took. No more contempt, no more fear, only the quiet reverence owed to a true warrior. As evening fell, the clinic emptied, but Ciala stayed more steadfast than any vow ever sworn. Silas stirred. "Ciala," his voice was like a broken whisper of wind. She sprang up, her sightless eyes lighting with a storm of emotion. "You're awake. Can you hear me?" Silas tried to squeeze her hand, as if to confirm the one beside him was real. "You did not leave me behind." "Never," she replied, her voice firm as stone. "You pulled me down from the gallows. Now it's my turn to pull you out of the dark." Silas smiled, tears welling in his eyes. "I thought I had died." Ciala leaned close, resting her forehead gently against his. "If you had died, my heart would have gone blind forever." The words hit Silas like a wave. This woman who had never seen his face saw him more clearly than his late wife ever had. He lifted a hand, trembling, and touched her cheek, and for the first time, he did not hold back his feelings. "Stay with me, Ciala. I already chose you," she said. Outside the window, the town was changing. The same people who once stood coldly watching her near execution now stood outside just to make sure. that a blind Apache girl would finally live as someone who deserved to. And under the warm flicker of lantern light, Silas and Ciala held each other's hands, two souls who were never chosen by the world, now choosing each other. Silas's wounds would take weeks to heal, but the wounds in his heart had begun to mend the moment Ciala placed her hand on his chest and whispered, "You have to hold on. Please do not scare me." When Silas was strong enough to ride back to the cabin, the town of Bitter Dust Gulch sent him a surprise gift: a few new planks of wood, a sack of seeds, and a baby's rocking chair. No note was left behind. Every item spoke louder than words: an apology and a thank you, carved into action. Ciala stepped into the familiar cabin, her fingers brushing the walls like greeting an old friend, the home that had once saved her life. But this time, it was not just a refuge. It was home. One warm afternoon, Silas said, "I have something to show you." "I cannot see anything," she replied. "You only need to touch." He placed a silver ring in her hand. It was not fancy. No gemstones. Just a smooth, clean edge like a quiet promise, spoken straight from the heart. "Silas, where did this ring come from?" "From 10 silver coins." 10 coins. "The price of my life?" Silas chuckled gently, his voice firm as a vow. "No, 10 coins. Brought you to me." Ciala raised the ring to her lips, tasting the cold metal and letting a single tear fall down her cheek. They stood beneath the old oak tree, where the spring wind played through the grass. No preacher, no white veil, just two souls in the sky to bear witness. Silas took her hands. "Ciala, you do not have to see me. Only know that I will always be here." Ciala reached up, touching the rugged line of his jaw, and whispered, "Silas, you are the light in my darkness." He slid the ring onto her finger slowly, carefully, as if afraid to drop this moment. And then their lips met a kiss between two people once cast aside by the world, now choosing each other, freely. The very next day, Silas began building a small room beside the bedroom. Ciala heard the steady rhythm of the hammer, the wind carrying his rare laughter toward her. She stood at the doorway, fingertips brushing the freshly nailed wood. "Are we expecting someone?" she asked, a smile playing on her lips. Silas stepped up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "A child, with a soul as bright as yours, as long as it is born from love." Ciala rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady, vibrant heartbeat, and she knew that child would not be born beneath gallows or under the jeering of a cruel world. It would be born in a home built on choice, on courage, and on a love that did not need eyes to see clearly. Outside, Bitter Dust Gulch remained a harsh and dusty frontier. But inside that small cabin, love had turned stone into hope. People think darkness is the place of loss, fear, and forgotten souls. But sometimes, in that same darkness, two of the most broken hearts can find each other. Ciala could not see the world, but she made the world see her. Silas could not save the wife he lost, but he saved his own heart when he reached for the blind girl on the gallows. Love does not need eyes to see. Love only needs two hearts, looking toward one another. After all this, I truly hope you live a happy life, no matter the circumstances. I love every single one of you, my dear audience of Wild West storytelling. Tell me what you think about this story in the comments. Type Ina if you enjoyed it. And do not forget to subscribe, so we can ride together into the next thrilling tale of the Wild West.